time. So there is a little bit of convergence in the way people are trying to look at modeling transitions. A third point is in other non-simulation model quantitative methods. There's firstly several presentations we had and several people getting active, especially PhD students, which is great in AI methods of various sorts. So I think that could be a thing for the future that we have to consider. And then finally, we had quite a lot of papers on methods in transdisciplinary research. And I think I won't try and summarize what the conclusions were, but there was certainly a tendency of, well, no, a feeling that I have from just observing that the involvement at a local stage is something very much a part of what we do. That's it, thanks.
And now we pass fast to track 4 on justice. Sure.
Can I do it? Okay. Hi, my name is Sona Park, and I was a track convener of track 4. Our track 4 was so successful, and we had total 9 sessions. We had total 9 sessions, and we occupied the biggest room in building 4, so it was so successful. And actually, our track 4 has 3 sub-themes, which are social acceptance and global south and justice. So each of branch, we learn from each other. I think it is what we didn't expect before, and I also learned from a lot. For example, I realized that I might be from global south. I haven't realized in that way before. And overall, we already have many kinds of like justice issues here, like in very big auditorium. Many of us are talking about just transition, energy transition with justice and vulnerability and so on. So we were actually glad to find those topics now very easily. So we welcomed it. But on the other hand, what we shared in track 4 was that justice is not very simple to just put on the previous theories or something like that. So for example, I'm a personally social acceptance literature. I do researcher, but social acceptance is in some countries, it's just kind of preferential problem, so you like it, don't like it, something like that. But when it comes to global south, it's kind of a survival problem. They are losing their land, and it is intervening their spiritual land, and it also threatens their survivals and so on. So we need more expanded understanding on justice. That's what we want to suggest. So later, maybe in next IST or next IST, we hope that we can more empower these kind of small topics which deserve more attention in next year or so on. Yeah, thank you.
And now, let's move on to track 5, the multi-systems interactions.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Maike Löhr. I was one of the conveners of the multi-system track. So the idea of 2 or more different systems interacting. We had 6 different sessions, including also a special session and debate. And we were, we had very active discussions, very good discussions, and mostly tried to focus on how are systems actually interacting, right? And we looked at different tools, mechanisms that can help us to understand this interaction. So there were system entanglers, system disentanglers being discussed. Multi-system work came up as an idea, and mechanisms for integration. We looked at system complexes to understand actually clusters of innovation. We looked into governance standards, valuation, linking different systems. business models. Yeah, and all over trying to actually conceptualize the interface and different units of analysis that we face. Maybe one quick point on like what we see how research could continue. So we think the time of analyzing single systems, it's over. If we really want to understand, explain, and steer sustainability transitions, we have to look into multiple systems and their interaction. Thank you.
And now we move to track 6 on actors with
Hi, I'm Caroline Rogge, and I was one of the conveners of the Actors in Accelerating Transitions track, which was focusing particularly on empirical research. We had 7 sessions, so we were also very big. And some observations. We had 2 main objectives. One was we really wanted to have a deep dive on actors. What are actors doing in this acceleration phase? How they're doing things differently or so? And the actors that we seem to study most are businesses. So we had a majority of contributions on that. We also had a really exciting session, that was actually my favorite one, on policymakers, where things that we discussed today in a plenary, but also later on in the working group that is just forming, were already studied by some of us, and it was really fascinating, and we had really good discussions. What was also noteworthy, we had aimed for 4 actor groups, so among them also societal actors and researchers that we study, like our role, for example, in transitions and accelerating transitions, and we had very few submissions on that and very few presentations. So I don't know whether these were just like hidden somewhere else in a different track, or that we are not really looking at these actors. So maybe a point of your future research, if someone is interested to unpack a little bit more the role of societal actors and researchers in accelerating transitions. The second objective from us was to highlight a bit more survey research among actors. And I think that was a really good first step, but we need to do more. We had opened the track to also have a look at other methods. So this was like a multi-method track, but I think it's a method that we can explore more, looking through surveys at what actors are doing. Then I wanted to share some overarching reflections. And one is about, well, is big beautiful? Because we had this big track, and I would say maybe not. In a sense, we are now in an acceleration phase with many transitions, sustainability transitions, and in that sense, acceleration as a track for our conference is perhaps a bit pointless, because lots of the things are on acceleration, like multi-system interactions, or destabilization and resistance. This is all happening. So I think in future ISTs, we probably don't need an acceleration track anymore. So that's one overarching conclusion. But what we do need, I think, is very dedicated sessions on specific things, like how do we measure acceleration, or some other things that pop up in the discussions, so that we have still ongoing debate in detail on some specific issues around acceleration. And the second point I want to make even more overarchingly, we as a STRN community, we are growing, which is great. So in a sense of accelerating transition, it makes sense that we are growing. But so with this expansion come new challenges also for conferences, and how can we have cross-cutting exchanges? And if we organize ourselves so much in these tracks, it will be difficult to have cross-cutting discussions. I mean, we have them in the plenaries, but I think it's time to think a little bit how we design future conferences. And I'm looking forward to that debate.
So I must remember 2 things. First thing is Caroline Rogge suggested the track on acceleration, and the second thing is much more positive. Is that it was a pleasure to work with you, because your track was really well organized. It was really everything on time, everything super well organized. So it was impressive, and thanks a lot for that. Seventh track on discontinuation. This track was very famous for having people, a small room and lots of people.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Leonard Frank. I was part of the organizational and convening team of the track for governing destabilization and discontinuation and decline, many related concepts. One of the issues of this track was that we talk about similar processes but use different words. I would say there were two main themes in the track. One was very much about processes and determinants of decline, and the other one was very much about the systemic embedding of actors and their strategies in this. And my main takeaway from it was that the research on destabilization and decline and discontinuation has been firmly embedded now as a research theme in its own right, which is clearly shown by the fact that we had a 20-people room and 50 people in there at times. And that it has been established as a very viable and fruitful way to look at transition processes, which open up incredibly interesting interfaces to larger transition processes. But at the same time, we do not yet know enough about how these processes actually link to transition processes as a whole. So the question of whether destabilization is just the flip side of innovation, I think that has been answered. No, it is something more. It is a process in its own right, but we cannot sort of paint the whole picture yet, and it is surprisingly difficult to place these processes within transitions as a whole, because they do go from beginning to end times. And then processes of destabilization they are certainly emergent processes, but there is a degree of intentionality in them, which is firmly studied. I would say roughly half of the contributions we had in our track actually looked at, well, it was a track about the governance of destabilization and discontinuation, but there were many contributions on policy. And I think this degree of intentionality that there is needs to be looked at more, because we do not know how big that degree is. It's of course also not a very easy question to answer, but it also can be harnessed, and it can be harnessed better the more we actually understand about how these processes of decline unfold. So I think we have many questions going forward. I'm also very happy to say that the new thematic group on D2P, processes of destabilization to decline, has been established. This was our first in-person gathering. There was very large interest in the thematic group, so if you are interested in these processes and haven't reached out to us, please do. We are now a thematic group with a web page on the STRN page. Do reach out to us, and we have a seminar series coming up, so there will be plenty of opportunities to engage in the future. Thank you so much for all your interest.
Thank you. And now we move to the geography track, so also a very demanded track.
Hi, since I can't actually get out of here, I just do it from here. So my name is Camilla Klebner, and I co-organize the Geography of Sustainability Transitions track at this conference. Just very quick and dirty. Basically, we saw very much a diversification in various terms. So different backgrounds of participants, but also sectors being studied, gets broader and broader. But also, we very much welcome that in our little kind of sub-community, diversification of different methods being actually applied in the research of the contributors. Just generally, I think the kind of observation is that we see more on scaling and diffusion now, rather than the kind of spatial distribution of innovative activity in space, so more on the kind of latter part of the process, which is obviously interesting and also very much welcomed. A little bit in my own capacity, we did organize the Nature Society Interactions webinar series lately. It was quite successful, and I'm glad to say at our today's little network meeting at lunch, new ideas were also already being thrown around, so stay tuned for more on that. And continuing on this subject of nature society interactions, we very much welcome contributions also at the GeoInno conference to continue the debate on that. The deadline is 14th of July.
Thank you. And now we move to the track 9 on urban transformation. London. Well, Actually, it's a double kind of track, right? So we will have double account.
True. So good afternoon from us from track 9 on urban imaginaries, visions, labs, experimentation. So I'm Anton Sentic from Zurich Applied Sciences. Together with my colleague Fiona Kinebra, we convened a track that brought together two teams that are apart but that still very much connected. So on urban imaginaries, on futures, imagining those positive visions of where our transformations can go to. And then over the tool of using visions with our stakeholders, I would go over to the local labs, to the experiments, real-world labs, transition arenas, which was the second main topic in our track. So I would like, we also had 6 sessions. They were quite well visited. Also, we had, I think, 40 people in a 20-person room at times. And I would like to use the opportunity to thank the co-conveners, Olivia, Johannes, Fiona, Verena, and Caroline, also for helping us run the track. So.
Thanks, Anton.
Yeah.
So in terms of the key topics and themes that we covered, the first big one was that urban imagination doesn't come out of the blue. It has to be trained, supported, and resourced. And so the one big concept we discussed was infrastructures of collective imagination, which can help us to better understand material and social conditions that are enabling urban imagination to flourish. So we discussed limits in current infrastructures and possibilities for more radical imaginaries of the future, focusing on the importance of the actors who are creating those imaginaries and those who are participating in processes for their creation as a site of politics, which needs to be studied and co-created.
So maybe talking from the lab side then, I think the one thing that I took away as a key topic is that we went a bit beyond the single lab or the single experiment. So even in the first session that we're focusing more on experiments, we heard about super living labs, we heard about meta labs, we heard about meta arenas for learning. I think what all of this is saying, it's more of a focus now how to connect those localized, contextualized loci of innovation, of co-development, co-creation, how to integrate, how to share learning, and how to share governance, evaluation. But I think there is also a challenge there because labs, experimentation being an ever increasingly popular topic, I think it's a bit hard for us to say where do labs end. If we start growing labs, are we going to end up with the entire world being one big living lab or real world lab?
So coming to main insights and takeaways. We had a lot of really nice contributions that were centered on arts-based, narrative, or creative practices, such as storytelling, gardening, visual art, and also theater. And looking at these as key levers for engaging urban futures. And what we saw is that these practices can serve as alternative infrastructures of imagination, allowing people to explore futures outside of dominant planning paradigms. And so those can contribute not only to visioning, but also to learning, reflection, and agency building.
And I would like to follow up with 3 quick lessons on the lab side. So one is the limits to participation. So a lot of us like to work with co-creation, with participation with multiple stakeholders, but it's hard to apply. It's limited resources, and we do need to take care to deliberately involve specific stakeholders, especially those who might not have a voice in more conventional research processes. Then the second one is maybe we should talk about learning beyond experimentation. So learning is underrepresented in a lot of the frameworks and a lot of the approaches, but it should be made more explicit, both inside learning, but also learning between sites, between labs, between transitions. And finally, what I also learned is that beyond experimentation, evaluation, and a lot of us are being now asked to evaluate, to provide KPIs, to show how the experiments cause impact. Evaluation itself can also be a transformative tool, especially if it's done co-creatively.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, there is a final message.
Yes.
Wait. Of course we have time for the final message.
The final message was just that urban futures are imagined before they're built. And so who gets to do that imagining and how matters, and it's political. And so we suggest that it has to be co-creatively negotiated through transdisciplinary and artistic approaches at local and translocal scales. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And now we pass to track 10 on civil society with Alexandra.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexandra Polida. I was the convener for track 10. Just to let you know that this was actually something that the organizing committee of IST'25 felt that was missing, so it organized the track. Track 10 is about civil society, culture, and social movements in transitions. First of all, I would like to thank the session chairs, Jonas Torrens, Francisca Bach, Flora Avellino, and Adrian Rinched, which kindly took over and lead the sessions. Our sessions explored a wide range of themes, including pathways and alternatives, climate action and energy, justice, the global south, and agro-food systems. As some key insights from my perspective, civil society actors are vital sources of innovation, resistance, and experimentation. Social innovations shape both practices and narratives challenging dominant systems. There are real tensions between the pace and depth of transition, especially in energy space. And above all, justice is not just a destination, but a principle that must guide transition processes. So to sum up, I would like to say that civil society must actively engage in reshaping transitions through innovation, resistance, and a commitment to justice-driven alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just checking. Yeah, the last one is the other topics. So that one is tricky. So we had 9 sessions, actually with a diversity of topics. The key themes included crisis and resilience, institutional legitimation, community engagement, mission-driven innovation, industrial and urban transitions, and the scaling of low-carbon technologies. Just remembering here some of key, let's say, transversal idea that came up, like the importance of investing in institutional capacity, adaptive governance, and deployment target policies, and like the one-sentence summary, emerging insights across governance, innovation, market, reveal new levers to accelerate and legitimize sustainability transitions. So after the themes, there were, of course, 27, 28 special sessions, new special sessions also in IST, such as in finance, special sessions in work, in industrial policy. So there were many interesting discussions, and unfortunately we cannot make the sum of all of them. But yes, the papers are online and you can access to them. Okay, so with that we close the second point and we move to the third point, which is, I'm opening here. Okay, I will ask Katharina Schiller to come to the floor and give the last speech from the network and some important announcements. So please, Katharina.
Thank you so much, Nuno. Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Katharina Schiller. I'm part of the board of STRN together with, sorry, am I not close enough? My name is Katharina Schiller. I'm part of the board of STRN together with Florian and Wouter Boon, whom you've seen up here as well. And first of all, in the name of STRN, we would like to extend warmest thank yous for this fantastic days that we've been able to have here in Lisbon. Thank you so much, Nuno, and the team, to all the 4 institutes for giving us these days, for hosting us, I would say, not just intellectually, but also enriching us, nourishing our bodies, nourishing our souls. We had the beautiful wine tasting. I don't know if we've ever had a wine tasting at an IST before. We had, I think, the dinner last night in that gorgeous old building was legendary, and especially the choir of, I forget what region they were from, Alentejo or something, yeah. But that was so, so impactful, at least for me. It was, yeah. So thank you so much for all of this, yeah, for, like I said, not just nourishing us intellectually this week, but also spiritually, and the stomachs with the delicious food that we've been having as well. Thank you. And now second, I would like to ask Jonathan to come up here really quickly. Jonathan Köhler is going to talk about the, STRN, we have a lot of, as you know, one of our pillars is research and education as well. And we have a method school for PhDs and early career researchers that Jonathan will talk about briefly.
All right. Hello again. Yep. Just very briefly, a couple of basic points. Firstly, there is going to be a method school this year. The title or the theme is going to be Mixed Methods Combining Qualitative and Quantitative Transitions Modeling. So I'll leave it there. You can ask me more details later. The dates are 17th to the 20th of November this year, 2025, not 26, 2025. And it's going to be hosted by Klaus and AIT in Vienna. Those are the most important points. I think some of the topics are going to be concepts for bridging, qualitative, quantitative dynamic modeling from Flora Alcamada maybe, some session on transdisciplinarity and how you bring mixed methods into transdisciplinarity, and then things around more modeling specific topics which we can go into later. That's the initial announcement. We'll be sending out a more detailed announcement and a call for applications to join as we do every year in a few weeks' time before the summer break. Thanks very much, Katerina.
Thank you, Jonathan.
No, I didn't. One more announcement, a bit more vague, but, well, not a bit more vague, a bit less detailed. I would also just like to mention that today there was a second meeting of the NEST NEST network on methods, and we are in the process of organising an activity through NEST of some webinars and other activities as well. So watch that space too. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, and now I have the pleasure and the honor of giving out this year's IST Notable Paper Awards. So within the steering group, we had a process last year where we discussed notable papers. Should we have one? Should we have several? How does this work? Are we even qualified scientifically to do this? And we decided that yes, we should have an STRN award at the conference. Maybe not a best paper, but a selection of notable papers. And I was in charge of leading this process this year. So we had 15 submissions of papers that were, you had to be an early career researcher, first author, in order to be able to be eligible for this. We had 15 really, really excellent papers, so it was definitely not an easy choice. We had a group of reviewers that I'd like to say thank you right now as well. That was Ingrid Mignon, Bipashi Ghosh, Tom Hawkswell, and Margarita Pontes. So thank you all for your volunteering to do this. The papers were reviewed by, each paper was reviewed by 2 reviewers. They were reviewed on the 3 criteria of originality, of their significance for the research field of sustainability transitions, and then of their scientific quality. And at the end, out of the 15, again, very excellent papers that were submitted, 4 papers were clearly at the top, not even clearly, were at the top, got the most amount of points, and these papers received a minimum of 8 points in each of the 3 categories by each reviewer, independently from one another. And I don't even know if these people are here yet because they have not been notified that they are paper award winners, but I hope they are. So if you are here, please do come up so I can give you your paper, and otherwise you'll receive an email. But first of all, we have Muhil Nesil for the paper Valuation Processes in Driving Transitions, the Case of Complex Consumer Product Sectors. Okay. Amazing. Congratulations. Yes, thank you. Secondly, and these are in no order, but I'm glad that you were first. Secondly, we have Hauke Lütgehaus with the paper Dead End Ahead, How Phase-Out Policies Affect Incumbent Adaptation to Technological Change in the Automotive Industry. Then we have Adrian Rinscheid with the paper, Do Stakeholders' Values Support Transformative Change in the Food System? Evidence from the Netherlands. Adrian. And last but definitely not least, we have Avi Jacmola with the paper, Is Later Slower or Faster? Comparing Technology Uptake Speeds Between Early and Late Adopters. Well, it looks like they are not here anymore, so I will email them. Yes, thank you so much again to all of the authors who submitted. Thank you to the group of reviewers. And I think now we were going to go ahead with the big secret that I would like to announce. I have the honor of announcing that next year's IST will go from Portugal to Zurich to the ETH. So yeah, please, warm welcome for Bernhard Truffer and the team.
Well, Jochen will take the lead. They just come to this side. Come on. Don't have to hide.
I guess 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This has been probably the best or worst kept secret ever, you know. I thank you very much for still being here, because, you know, everybody is waiting until the last minute. Everybody wants to desperately go home, but they are sitting here, because we don't know where next year's IST is happening. But this has not been the case this year, so information has been leaked through. And if it had not, at least you saw the slide already. Maybe we can bring the slide up now. That would be perhaps. Oh, I have to.
Beautiful slide.
I can't click. Can you make it big? Anyway, there's a beautiful slide, as I was saying. So, the slide will show sooner or later, I guess. First of all, important for a good conference, as we saw this year, is a good conference team. So, I'm very happy to introduce the core team. Mohil Nesi, the one and only, Bernhard Truffer. Yeah, the two one and onlys, Michael Löhr, Alejandro Nunes, Jamila Nesh, and Max Hoos. And not to forget Christian Binz, who is not here anymore, but he will also a vital pillar of the organizing committee. And there might be more as we speak. If we see the slide in a minute. So the dates will be, we will start end of August, and we will go into September 2nd. So it will be... See, here we're going. Yeah, the slide is up. The slide is up. So here you see the dates. We will welcome you in Zurich at the premises of ETH, and we are really looking forward to a great conference. I'm not sure we can match this year's experience, but we will really do our very best. And we have been, you know, during the last days, we have been sneaking around, taking notes, and it's like, how did things go? And I already had a list of things, you know, that is definitely how to make next year's conference a success. So the first thing is you need to have a great team. Thank you, Nuno. And here is a great team. A second issue to have a great success is to have small rooms. So, because that way, if you're giving a presentation in a small room and it's super crowded, you have a, you know, this is a very impressive feeling. So that's really a note to the organizers. And of course, the third and most important thing for having a great conference is what? Party! Thank you, Nuno, for one of the coolest parties. and everybody for organizing such a cool party. So we will make sure that we also have a good party in Zurich. Okay, and now a few words on the topic.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I was among those that have talked to a few people about the next conference, but I told all of them to keep it as a secret. Didn't work out. So let's say, you could say the conference theme is one of the most boring things in a conference because no one will respond to the conference theme in any ways. But on the other hand side, it's also a bit of a signal of what are the sort of the challenges. I guess you, Nuno, and your team, you chose a really interesting one about the tensions and conflicts that appear with the scaling. And I guess we would follow up on that a bit by turning the angle a bit and focus on hope. So how can we raise hope, and how can we do that from a transitions perspective? Now, this inspiration about the topic of hope came from reading the quite well-known book of the Ministry for the Future of Kim Stanley Robinson. Perhaps some of you have read it, and you should read it. It's really very inspiring sort of science fiction about how the world could develop. And one fancy part of it, or element of that, is it is anchored around Zurich. So if you read the book, you will learn a lot about Zurich, and you can then go on the tracks and see where things have happened in the future, you know. But you know, really the important point was when he was asked at one of his presentations where he took the optimism, you know, to talk about a successful future or a bright future. He said, well, he had no optimism at all. If at all, you know, he was very pessimistic for all the things that didn't work and all the challenges that were out there. But as intellectuals, you know, we have a sort of a civic duty to not just lament and fearmonger, but to say, well, how could we just trace processes and have develop visions that we could get out of the mess and prevent the bad from happening? And I think that's the sort of interpretation that we took here for hope. So hope is something constructive. It's not an emotional attitude, but it was something constructive that you can appropriate or try to implement as a research community. So is transitions the field, a field that creates hopeful messages? I would say so. Since the beginnings, it has all been about better understanding. The very origins were about showing that society had a role in technological development. So it was all against techno-determinism, and that's essentially, not always, but essentially opens up for more hopeful views. Then we have all this research on experiments and participation, which also suggests, you know, there is a role for many people to construct to the development. And last but not least, you know, we have this very stylized fact, which is very potential to say, oh, even if radical alternatives, it's very normal that nothing happens for a very long time, but when the conditions are right, it will go very quick. So this is famous S-curve. And this is sort of a vocabulary, if you want, you know, for being hopeful, or that we could actually be hopeful. Perhaps we have not been enough like that. And let me just finish by one reference to the past, and then we will go to the future. And you know, with the transitions framework, you know, we lived through it, Johan and I, we lived through it. You know, it all started in the early 90s, mid 90s. And then I always refer to that as the happy 90s, you know, because the world was sort of simple, because the dominant explanatory narratives that were provided, and we hated it and we fought against it, was neoclassical economics and neoliberalism. And we always said that's too simple, you know, it's much more complex, we have to do blah, blah, blah. And saving the planet was also very simple, because we said, oh, it's essentially climate change, and you can just cut it down to say it's about CO2 emissions. So if we manage renewables and electric cars, then we will have a happy planet, you know? So that's the happy 90s. So if we look at the discussions we had here at the conference as well, so the world has grown much more messy. And one of the important things to reflect on is how should we perhaps develop our frameworks further? You know, they were fantastic for the situation of the 90s. Are they still up for the challenges that we're confronting now? We don't have the answers to that. So that's what we would like to elaborate or to explore a bit at the Zurich conference. Not only there, but let's say have also been a few organized formats to address these sort of issues and hopefully develop something deeper insights. But speaking of hope, it's not in the old white man, as we know, but in the younger generation. So that's where Jamila comes on stage. Thanks a lot.
Hi, just very quick from my side. So we, the early career researchers from ETH and also from EAVAC, are very happy to invite you to next year's Early Career Researcher Day in Zurich that we will be co-organized with NEST. And I think already this year it was really inspiring to see so many young scholars from all over the globe coming here together in Lisbon. And for next year, we hope to foster exchange on how we can build academic careers that keep ourselves hopeful and inspire also others to envision and act towards alternative futures. And also on how we can restore and build trust in science, and lastly, on how we can maintain this community as a source of hope. So we are really looking forward to welcome you next year in Zurich.
That, I thank you again for coming to Lisbon. I wish you safe trips back home. And the time of the IST'25 is over. Thank you.